October 13th, 2025. We are in the fourth year on the 249th day of the war in Ukraine. Welcome. I greet you to the Daily Situation Report. You may already see it in the comments because there have been some changes. Channel members have had access to new emojis and badges since yesterday. Instead of having symbols of different branches like before, you now build up the War and Tactic logo. New members start at 0 and then build up the War and Tactic logo through the engines shown below, up to a 10-year mark that YouTube now offers us. What is the difference between a subscriber and a member? Subscribers don't pay anything but support us with their subscription, while members make sure that some money goes into the till so that I can finance fixed costs, new purchases, and projects, and still have to show little to no advertising in the reports. That's thanks to the channel members who are here among us and quietly and discreetly make their contribution. In today's report, we see the nationwide large-scale nighttime attack on energy, railway, and residential areas, the critical situation in and around Pokrovsk, as well as new technology trends for intercepting drones and glide bombs, and, of course, much more. Russia attacked energy, railway, and residential areas in Ukraine during the night. In Zaporizhia, residential houses and apartment buildings were damaged. One person was confirmed dead. Over a dozen people, including 6 children, were injured and trapped. A dormitory was hit. Several floors collapsed as a result. In the Vinnytsia and Kyiv regions, residential buildings were damaged. There were also injuries here. Explosions and power outages were reported from the Ivano-Frankivsk and Lviv regions. In most places, emergency power shutdowns occurred because important elements were damaged or destroyed by the attack. Zelensky responds to Russia's massive overnight attack. According to him, more than 650 drones and over 50 missiles were launched, including ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. Zelensky demands tangible consequences for Russia, more sanctions, and therefore more pressure. In the occupied Luhansk region, another power outage has been reported, this time a complete one for a specific area. The occupation authorities mention a malfunction at the local power plant, but the cause is still unknown. Reports from the region mention failures in transportation, communication, and supply. According to initial reports, clinics are already operating on emergency power, and repair teams are on their way. However, there is no timetable for restoration. However, I have no information about a Ukrainian attack, so it's likely, and that's what I'm assuming now, that it was negligence on the Russian side that led to a fire at the power plant. The French defense company Outage is starting mass production of interceptor drones in France, together with Ukrainian engineers. The AI-based systems are aimed at guided aerial threats and are also intended to be effective against glide bombs. Parts of the production will gradually be localized in Ukraine. And yes, you heard correctly, glide bombs. I don't know how well that will work. I mean, technically, it's certainly possible to intercept glide bombs with them. However, personally, I need 1 or 2 field tests before I can really form a solid opinion about it. And I think it will be a few more months, if not years, before we see that. A Ukrainian Leopard 204 ran over a Russian drone trap with fiber optic control near Pokrovsk. The tank didn't explode when it ran over it, only the track was damaged. With Russian vehicles, similar devices have often led to detonations in the past. Total loss. Before anyone misunderstands this, the drone wasn't waiting on the ground for the tank to run over it, but rather for a target it could fly towards. I assume that the pilot was looking in the wrong direction with the camera and was waiting for a target when the tank came. Why stay grounded instead of flying? There are 2 reasons. First, a drone in flight is detected faster than one hidden on the ground. And second, the drone's battery isn't used up as much. This allows it to stay in a certain position for a long time and wait for valuable targets instead of having to fly there. Then attack any target if needed. It's also possible that the pilot can't manage to launch the drone in time, or maybe doesn't even notice the tank. Waiting to be run over by a Western tank doesn't make any sense, because we prepare our tanks for exactly these situations, like hitting a mine. The only thing that usually happens then is what we see. The track gets destroyed and the tank is temporarily immobilized. Of course, you could send other drones there to take it out, but that definitely wasn't the priority. Speaking of Leopard, are they more suited for defense or offense? If you order one of our popular glass photos now, it will arrive before Christmas. It doesn't matter whether it's the Patriot launcher that shot down the first Kincher missile or our big cat, the Leopard 2. Both make your desk, living room cabinet, or display case look more high quality, especially if you add the LED light base. The link is always in the video description. In the area around Dobrapilya, the remaining Russian forces can be roughly reduced to this area here. The Ukrainians kept advancing, pushing them closer. At the same time, the last Russians in this area are trying to move east, towards Shakov. The place is de facto under Ukrainian control, but it's only occupied by a handful of soldiers. Here, drones do most of the work in case the Russians break in at the edge of town again. It's quite possible that they want to reach the place to re-establish the connection with Russian forces nearby, who are usually trying to make their way toward Shakov at the level of the 33rd Brigade. That's still this yellow-marked area right here, where we've already reported 1 or 2 attacks. The Russians made it up to the red pin here last time, but were then pushed back again. This area isn't continuously occupied. As I said, it's just the access route for the Russians, who come along this dirt road, turn here, and drive up through here. Of course, it's possible that the last remaining forces will try to break out of this pocket here and find shelter in Shakov for the time being, until they can catch up here again. Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi reports ongoing difficulties near Pokrovsk at this site. Here we can see territorial changes again. This is yesterday's attack, which is also marked in dark red because it is still ongoing. Here in town, we already see 2 more changes. The Ukrainians have lost this area here, and the Russians were able to capture it. This area here was marked yellow on my map before. Now it's red. It's now in the hands of the Russians. Now it's securely in the hands of the Russians. Right here, the Ukrainians tried to launch an attack from a road to cut off Russian logistics. The problem was that they didn't succeed. The Russians immediately spread out, which was also the only militarily logical consequence. They're widening their lead further. They will now try to move north here, possibly through the city to block the supply lines right here. If they haven't already done that with the units in the town, and as I said, they're talking about a difficult situation here. A difficult situation always means in Russian and Ukrainian usage that the situation is more than terrible. He firmly rejects Russian reports about the encirclement of Ukrainian forces. The enemy is shifting to urban combat, using cover and avoiding direct fights. Syrskyi says Ukraine is countering with assault troops, precise drone use, and close coordination. Every time we've seen a battle in a larger location, the Russians cut off Ukrainian logistics, and the units inside ended up in a pocket. The retreat frequently occurred at the last minute, causing heavy losses and leaving valuable equipment behind during rushed, uncoordinated withdrawals. Anyone who's been here for a while knows how many times I've talked about such a withdrawal, and how many times I've said that. If the Ukrainians don't get out of there now and leave that position, then things will get critical. And that's how it always was. We've been extremely lucky that entire brigades haven't always been encircled in the past. As I mentioned, not all Ukrainians escaped the half-encirclements or impending encirclements. Some remained in their positions permanently, and that's exactly it. And please forgive my frustration because all of this is very avoidable. But that's exactly what we're seeing again right now. It's a repetition of battles that we've only seen before in a different place. I predicted this development, even though I've received 1 or 2 emails, a Discord chat, or comments that saw things differently. The current situation still confirms my warnings. I hoped for Ukrainian counterattacks and that they wouldn't just hold positions in the town, but that's exactly what they're doing, while the Russians are actively attacking. Right now, when the Russians come, the Ukrainians usually respond with drones. But if 10 Russians capture a house and only 8 are fought off with drones, then the next day there will be 10 Russians in that house again. while other Russians continued to expand the new advance. Many comments said this is a war of attrition, with Russians deliberately led into the city to wear them down from all this. Basically, it's true that the Ukrainians want to weaken their enemy through heavy losses without having to attack everywhere themselves. That saves time, that saves soldiers, but here you're trading time for territory. That's just not suitable for holding a key location. If you only hold your ground, you'll eventually lose territory in the city since no meat grinder can reliably stop every wave. The Russians won't give in unless you actively confront them. No matter how well a position is defended, eventually it will break too if the Russians keep sending in one man after another and get closer to the position day by day. And at the same time, they will try to cut off supplies in the rear and form another pocket. Wearing them down doesn't work like that in Pokrov's, because, as in Bakhmut and early Avdiivka, the Russians no longer fight in cities as they once did. They're easier to fight on open fields. In built-up areas, they bypass sections, cut them off, and then advance. Here, active counterattacks, mobile barriers, and timely clearing of endangered sections are needed. Otherwise, the situation will tip in favor of the Russians. But most importantly, counterattacks are needed. See what fiber optic drones can assess. The operator's image is sharp and without delays. Not at all like what we knew at the beginning of the war, because the drone here is controlled via fiber optics and not by radio. This makes it immune to any kind of jamming signal. You can also see this clearly in the drone's shadow. Here, the fiber optic spool is clearly visible. Usually there is a fiber optic coil wound between 20 and 40 kilometers, inside which unwinds automatically during flight. This also lets you fly into buildings or shelters easily, as shown here. The Russian shooter tries in vain to fend off the drone, but he doesn't hit it. And as you can see, that was enough to neutralize the shelter. And with that, as always, thank you for listening. Feel free to subscribe, like, or leave comments, and see you in the next Situation Report.